So my name is Hilal. I am 30 years old. I'm a teacher and have been since 2018. Right now I'm in Seljaskóli. I'm working in Móttökudeild, which is the receiving department of refugee kids, where I teach them Icelandic. In my free time, I do a lot of volunteer work, and this volunteer work actually comes from my young years. I've been doing volunteer work since I was 15, and it's a huge part of my life. It's a huge part of who I am today. So I am born and raised in Denmark, in Copenhagen, and my parents are originally from Turkey. So my grandfather, he came to Denmark in the 60s to work, and then he just basically decides to stay. So my dad came when he was 9 years old. So I'm the firstborn Kurdish, Danish in Denmark. Yes, so as I said, I've spent a lot of my young years mentoring and doing volunteer work, working with young people, and especially young people with a different background than Danish. And the goal has totally been to help them navigate the Danish culture, the Danish system, to be a part of the Danish society, because I grew up in a time where we were two groups. It was the Danish kids and then the non-Danish kids. So my goal with all of my friends back then was to try to integrate these two into each other, because it is actually very similar and very easy to live this way as to integrate and take the Danish culture to your and to become a part of your lifestyle as a Muslim person. Because when we grew up, it was I call us the 9/11 kids. Or the 9/11 Muslim kids, especially, because we were the ones, when it happened, I was 6 years old, and in a very early age, I had to defend my religion. I had to talk about why we were not terrorists, why we actually were good people. I always had to convince people that we were good. So I actually grew up with this convincing instinct to always talk about, okay, I'm actually good people. So I actually I always smiled some more, always were more welcoming in I didn't feel like I could be a person who could just be sad in the bus or be mad, because I had something I was presenting. I was presenting Islam. And to grow up with this on your shoulders as a child is very heavy. But I did, and when I reflect on it today, I'm thinking, yeah, maybe it happened for a reason, because I am the person I am today. So I see being a Muslim, practicing Muslim, for me is not something that I divide from being integrated into the Icelandic or Danish society, or I call it the Scandinavian now, because I've lived both places. For me, it is actually a lifestyle where, because Islam has a lot of values that are actually also appreciated a lot in the Scandinavian countries. Things like justice, things like the importance of community, things like honesty, truthfulness. All these things are a huge part of Islam, and you are actually not allowed to go out of these. You're not allowed to lie. You're not allowed to be injustice. Actually, one of God's 99 names in Islam is justice. So, and we always try to take these names and be the good person, because we know that God is justice, God is honest, God is merciful. So we try as Muslims to take this upon us and try to be the best version of ourselves also. And when you look at the Scandinavian society and the Scandinavian values, all these things are a huge part. Democracy is a huge part of the society we live in. So as a Muslim, it actually becomes very easy to live here. But then there's the picture that the media gives. That's a whole other story of the things. And for me, I would say that dialogue is one of the keys to break these misconceptions that could be about what one thing actually is. So is Islam actually justice? Because that's not what I see in the medias. So instead of just wondering, the thing I want to talk about today is talking to each other. Talking and communicating, because when you communicate, you start to understand. Because ignorance is something that comes from ignoring each other and not asking the open questions and being open for dialogue, at least. So when I was young, I remember I asked my dad. My dad is a very clever man who always taught me that when I was a kid, I remember once I went, because the Muslims in my class, they didn't want to go to church for Christmas. So I go home and I'm so confused because my dad has always told me that the church is also God's house and we can pray in God's house as Muslims as long as there's no picture in front of us. So we can go in a corner and we can pray. So I go home and I say, Baba, these people, they say we can't go to church for Christmas. And he was like, don't listen to them, you go. So I grew up with a dad like this, which I'm very grateful for, a dad who always tried to show us, who always taught me that, yes, Jesus is a prophet in Islam, and we love him as much as all the other prophets, peace be upon them. And always talked about this way of respecting other religions. So I grew up with this, thankfully. So in my teenage years, trying to understand how can I be Muslim in Denmark, how can I try to integrate these things together? It was very difficult because of all these things, all these questions I constantly got. And I remember once, it was in university, where there was a terrorist bombing happening in France, and I was devastated that day, literally devastated, because I thought, okay, first of all, it's going to be put upon Muslims. This crushes me because I do not press on a fly if I see it's underground. So it touches you as someone who believes in this religion, because I know that my prophet, Muhammad, peace be upon him, would walk around with chains around his ankles so the animals could hear it and walk away so he didn't step on them. So when you believe in a religion like this, it often becomes very difficult to start to try to navigate this hate you get. And someone from my class, he looked at me and he said, are you supporting this terror thing that happened in France? And I just looked at him and I said, are you seriously asking me this question? And I just turned my back because it was actually very heavy to get this question. And so in my young years, it was very difficult, but when you get knowledge, when you learn more about your own religion, when you learn more about other religions, you start to be more confident in what you believe in. And I always say, wherever I go, I say, I'm a proud Muslim, I'm a proud hijabi, someone who wears the hijab, and I'm also a proud Danish person who lives in Iceland, because I see myself as Danish. Right now I live here, but when people ask me, where are you from? I don't say I'm from Turkey. I say I'm from Denmark, because that's where I was born. And I always got the question, so where are you from? Yeah, I'm from Denmark, but where are you actually from? And then I'm like, yeah, okay, my parents they have Kurdish roots. Okay, now we can agree, like, okay. So then people are like, okay, so when you start to get this confidence, you also relax more in your religion, and you actually realize how easy it is to live it in the society you are. Because the Prophet Muhammad, he said that you should you should live Islam according to the society you are in. I understand this hadith, this saying, as, okay, you're not supposed to take the Middle Eastern values and bring them here and say, my wife is not allowed to work, or my wife is not that, or I am not allowed to do this, or I have to wear this. No, I can wear modest clothes here and still be a part of the society. I can wear my hijab and still people can see me, because I would never allow myself to wear something that is not accepted in the society. But this is my personal experience. This is my personal opinion on this, for example. Yeah, so in my work life, I pray 5 times a day. In my work life, this doesn't affect me, because I just find 5 minutes in my break and I go and pray. And praying in Islam, I don't know if you guys know how it goes, but you can pray in 3 minutes. It doesn't take long. So in my daily life, it's not difficult for me to be Muslim, and I share my values and my daily life. I told my colleagues that I'm coming here to have this speech today. So when we are open because I've always been someone, people always tell me, Hilal, we can always ask you questions because you're very open for questions. And that's what I try to be, because I know a lot of people don't know much about the lifestyle I have, and therefore I should be open to these questions. And there are some common stereotypes about Islam that we also experience or hear a lot, and one of them is the hijab, where in the Western world this is seen as something that prevents me from being a woman or being a feminist. But I want to talk a little bit about the Western understanding of feminism and then inclusive feminism. Because these two things are something I recently I did a video for Reykjavík a week ago actually, where I was talking about the hijab. And this video is going to be on something called Torkið, where they are, the schools and everyone who works in Reykjavík can open this video up and watch it, and just to get some information. And I read about this inclusive feminism that says, in the Western world, we understand feminism as the woman should be allowed to show her body as much as she wants. She should be allowed to wear whatever she wants. And if she doesn't want to wear anything, she should also be allowed to do that. Where inclusive feminism is, yes, we should be allowed to decide what we want to do with our body as women or men, just as human beings. But I should also be allowed to cover up my body if I want to do that. So, because in the Middle East, it's also a fight when you want to cover up your body in the Middle East. It's not easy. I remember my grandfather, he was like, why are you wearing this? This is so unnecessary. So it's not because all Muslims are for the hijab and, oh, you get praised and blah, blah, blah. That's not the case with the hijab. It can also be difficult there, but it's a choice. It's a choice you make because you feel spiritually close to God. You feel like a 10, as you were talking about. Okay, my relationship to my God is a 10, 100%. I don't even have to think about saying the number. But then I also want to do something for that number, because I love my God, and God tells me in the Holy Book, He actually talks to the men first. He says, men's hijab, men's modesty is their eyes. And this is actually more difficult, because they have to cover their eyes. They have to watch out for what they're looking at. They can't just walk around, look, because they have to be modest. They have to protect what they see with their eyes, where the woman is asked to cover her hair and her chest. And this modesty for me, is a huge gift. I don't see this just as a material. I see this as a part of me who are trying to get closer to God. So this is a spiritual road that I chose to take. And there's also a lot of women who don't want to wear the hijab, but who are very good Muslims also. So the hijab doesn't define you being a Muslim. It's like when you're a Christian and you're supposed to go to church every Sunday, but you choose not to do, for example. This is a choice you make. And the same thing is in Islam. And people often think that Islam you cannot choose, you have to do it. But that's not the case. We're human beings and we can choose what we want to do and what we don't want to do. Which, is a common sense, I would at least hope. And then, so the last thing I just want to say is that it's important that we ask questions, that we talk to each other, that we are curious about each other instead of judging each other, that I can respect, I don't have to agree with you, but I can respect your opinions, the way you're living your life, and the way you're practicing your daily life. Again, this is the thing with tolerance, because tolerance can sometimes be understood as something negative, where I take it and say, okay, I don't have to agree with you, but I respect you and I respect the way you live your life. So let's try to change our views on people, I would say, and be more curious and be more open. And let's not choose ignorance, because it doesn't create any kind of dialogue, and it doesn't create a society that touches each other and that actually gets to share values with each other. There's a priest in Nørrebro in Copenhagen who says that if we can share daily life, we can also share special occasions and just our understanding of who God is to every single person. Yes, thank you so much.